Something crashed in New Mexico in 1947, and the government classified everything for 75 years. What they hid will change everything you thought you knew. July 8, 1944, the Cross, a remote Mexican ranch. By nightfall, the U.S. military had sealed every road within 50 miles. The military arrived before sunrise and collected everything in silence. Colonel Reed oversaw the operation and never spoke about it again. The newspaper ran the headline at noon, "Flying Saucer Captured." By 6 p.m., the military had replaced it with a completely different story. Every witness was visited personally within hours. Each one was told the same thing: you did not see what you think you saw. What was recovered was moved to a facility nobody officially knew existed. 3 presidents asked to see inside. Only one ever was. Dr. Cross found the file in a batch of newly declassified documents in 2024. It had been hidden for 7 to 7 years behind a single classification stamp. When they presented the evidence, the room went completely silent. Not because it was new, but because someone had clearly seen it before. The file contained one photograph that has never been shown to the public. Watch the full video, because what comes next changes everything. July 8, 1947. Debris scattered across a remote New Mexico ranch. By nightfall, the U.S. military had sealed every road within 50 miles. Colonel Reed arrived at the debris field before the sun came up. His expression told every soldier present this was not a weather balloon. By midnight, the base was operating at a level of urgency nobody could officially explain. Every movement logged, every communication monitored, every order classified immediately. The headline ran at noon, "Flying Saucer Captured." The military had it replaced with a new story before the evening edition printed. Witnesses were visited before they had time to speak to anyone else. Agent Black knocked on doors across Roswell until 3 a.m. that night. The rancher was told his story was mistaken and his memory was unreliable. He signed the document placed before him and never spoke publicly again. The press conference showed a weather balloon to every camera in the room. Reed stood at the side and watched and said nothing for 30 years after. The revised statement was typed and distributed within 6 hours of the original. The convoy moved without headlights through empty desert at 2 a.m. What was inside those vehicles has never appeared in any declassified document. The vault door had not been opened by anyone outside the program since 1947. Black was the 3rd person in 50 years to be given the access code. The military changed their official story 3 times in 24 hours. Every witness was silenced before they could talk to anyone outside the base. Comment: do you think the government has ever told the full truth about Roswell? Everything recovered was loaded into sealed crates before dawn. Reed watched every crate personally. Nothing left that facility without his signature. Cross found the file in 2024 in a batch nobody had. Reviewed since 1952. It had been misfiled deliberately. She was certain of that within the first page. Black walked out of the sheriff's office with everything the local police had collected. The sheriff never filed a report. There was nothing left to report on. Reed received his orders from Washington before the sun came up. He listened without speaking and hung up without asking a single question. The archive box Cross needed had been flagged for restricted access that same week. Someone had gotten there recently. 3 documents were missing from inside it. Every soldier who worked the debris field that night received TH. Same sealed envelope. Inside was 1 page and a line at the bottom that said "Sign here." The cleanup was completed in 4 hours. Every piece recovered. Every trace removed. Reed walked the entire field himself before he allowed anyone to leave. The document Cross held up to the light contained a second layer of text. written in a different hand beneath the official typed report, added years later. Black arrived in Washington before the official report had even been written. The people he was meeting already knew everything. They had been informed hours earlier. Reed placed the folder on that desk and said nothing after he put it down. The man across from him opened it, read one page, and closed it without comment. Every witness signed a document and stayed silent for the rest of their lives. The rancher who found the debris never spoke publicly, not once in 40 years. Comment: do you think the witnesses were protecting themselves or protecting something else? The research reports from 1947 had been rewritten 3 times before anyone outside saw them. Cross found all 3 versions, and the differences told the real story. Black had read the original report and the revised version side by side. 17 facts had been changed, none of them small. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base became the center of everything after July 1947. Reed visited it 14 times in the following year, all visits classified. The call Cross received confirmed the documents were authentic. Someone inside had verified them and asked her not to say who. Reed sat before the Senate and answered every question with 4 words. That is classified information. Black showed Cross the document in the packing structure at midnight. She read it once and said, "This was written by someone who was there." The rancher looked at the document for a long time before picking up the pen. He signed it and moved away from Roswell within the month. Reed had carried that folder for 30 years without once setting it down willingly. Standing at that window was the first time it felt heavy to him. Cross laid out 7 to 7 years of evidence in 40 minutes. When she finished, nobody in the room asked a single question. The timeline showed one thing clearly. The story changed every decade without explanation. Each revision buried the previous version deeper than the one before it. 7 to 7 years. 3 official explanations. 0 consistency. Every person who was there either signed a document or disappeared from public record. Comment: at what point does changing the story become proof that there was something to hide? The facility beneath the base employed 200 scientists. None of them officially. Reed oversaw every department from that walkway every single morning. The aerial photograph showed something in the debris field that the written reports never mentioned. Cross circled it and said, this was edited out of every official version. Black showed the official the document while walking so nobody saw them stop. The official read it once, then handed it back without saying a word. Reed read that same page every night for 3 years after Roswell. He was looking for the line that would tell him he had made the right decision. The UV scanner revealed a second document written directly beneath the first. Cross looked at it and said, someone knew this would be found eventually. The vault had not been opened in 11 years before Black arrived. The access code had been changed twice. He had the 3rd version. Reed stood at the edge of that light for minutes before stepping forward. Every soldier present remembered exactly how long he waited. The flagged file had been accessed only once since 1947. In 1963, Cross clicked it and understood immediately why it had stayed hidden. The professor studied the diagram for 10 minutes without speaking. Then he looked at Black and said, this material does not exist on Earth. Reed placed the folder in the general's hands and stepped back. He had carried it for 12 years. It was the last time he ever touched it. Cross had the document. Black had the access. Standing on that rooftop, they both understood. There was no going back now. Reed watched the building for 3 hours without moving. Whatever came out of it that night was already expected and already classified. The press briefing lasted 6 minutes before officials shut it down. Cross had said for sentences that was enough. The circled section had been written by someone who was not supposed to be there. Cross knew this because the handwriting matched no one on the official roster. Reed pointed to that location on the map, and the room went completely still. Not one of the 6 officers asked where the information came from. The old man had waited 77 years to say what he told Black that afternoon. He said he signed the document because he had a family, and he was afraid. The coordinates in the declassified file led to empty desert. Officially, Cross stood there at midnight and knew immediately the ground had been disturbed recently. Reed had written himself a letter in 1947 and sealed it for 30 years. When he finally opened it, none of his questions had been answered. Cross sat at that witness table and told the Senate what 77 years of files contained. The room stayed silent for 11 seconds after she finished. Nobody moved. 47 incidents. 77 years. One unbroken thread connecting all of them. Black looked at the board and said, "This was never meant to stay hidden forever." The facility employed 200 scientists whose names appear in no public record. Reed walked those corridors every morning for 11 years. The same phrase appeared in both documents, written 5 years apart by different authors. Cross circled it and said, "This was coordinated, not coincidental." The perimeter fence had no markings and no official designation on any public map. Black stood at the road and photographed it anyway. The memo said one thing clearly: this conversation never happened. Reed read it twice, folded it, and put it in his folder without a word. The authentication program confirmed every document was genuine within 4 hours. Cross watched the results appear and said nothing until the last line loaded. Black sat outside that building for 6 hours before anyone emerged. What he saw confirmed the final piece of what Cross had found in the archive. The former officer testified for 40 minutes and named 3 people. Reed sat in the gallery and never once looked away from him. The box had been misfiled in 1952, Cross believed deliberately. Inside were 14 pages that contradicted every official account. Black stood at the desert fence at midnight with one question left unanswered. The answer was on the other side, and there was no official way to get there. Reed opened the folder in his study for the first time in 20 years. He read it and understood he had been protecting the wrong thing all along. Cross placed the sealed envelope on the table and said, "Open it in front of everyone." The room went very quiet before anyone reached for it. The telegram said for words that should never appear in any military communication: "Do not document this." Black walked toward that building knowing this conversation would end careers. He walked in anyway because some things matter more than careers. Cross put the 1947 file between them and asked Reed one question. He looked at it for a long time before he answered. For the first time, all 3 of them sat at the same table in public. What they said in the next 4 hours changed the official record permanently. Black stood at that window the night before the hearing and made his decision. Tomorrow, everything he had carried for 2 years would be on the record forever. Reed stood in that field alone after everyone had gone and looked up at the sky. He never spoke about what he saw that night, not to anyone, ever. Cross waited for the confirmation call before. She allowed herself to believe. It was real. When it came, she sat completely still for 3 minutes before moving. Reed placed the folder on the table, and the entire Senate chamber leaned forward. 77 years of silence ended in that single moment. Cross reviewed her notes one final time. Black sat completely still beside her. In 20 minutes, they would walk into that room and say everything. Every document spread across that table told a piece of the same story. Cross stood back and finally saw all of it at once, and it was exactly what she had suspected. Reed opened the folder in public for the first time in 77 years. Every camera in the room captured it, and it could never be classified again. They stood at that memorial without speaking because nothing needed to be said. The people who deserved answers had waited long enough. The folder lay open on that table under the lights of a Senate hearing room. Everything inside it was now part of the permanent public record. The desert looks exactly the same as it did in 1947. The question of what happened here has never been officially answered, and may never be.